Hi, welcome to the Entourage Yearbook Photoshop segment of the conference. And today we're going to examine layer masks and masks in general. And even if you're a beginner in Photoshop, these two tools are going to make you much more efficient and much more effective in your editing of photographs. So let's get started with it right now. I've created a file here that has three layers in it: a red layer, a yellow layer, and a blue layer. And if I turn those layers on and off, what is underneath each layer becomes visible. Now, if we want to reveal what is underneath this red layer, we can grab our eraser tool right here, and we can go through here and we can delete that. And those pixels have now been removed, and we can see the yellow that's underneath it. We can also click on our yellow layer. And if we want to see what's underneath that, we can also stay on our eraser tool and we can delete those pixels. And in this way, we can remove the pixels to see what's underneath. The problem is, if we want to put those pixels back, you're going to have trouble because they cannot be restored. Now we can undo, but we can only undo so much. And once you close this file and then reopen it, your history is gone and you're no longer able to undo that. In something where we're talking with solid colors, there's not that big of a deal, because if I want to restore that red, I can just come over here, grab the red in my color palette and paint it back in. But suppose I'm doing something with a photograph and I've got this picture here, and I come into my eraser and I want to erase this because I think I'm not going to need it, and then I close this out, save it, open it up at a later date. Those pixels are gone and I can't restore that. So doing something where we can actually come back and undo what we have done is going to give us much more power and much more control when it comes to editing a photograph. So let's look at a layer mask and how it would be advantageous to us as photo editors. So I'm going to undo everything in here, and I now have three color palettes and they're all solid. So what I'm going to do, rather than erase, I'm going to grab my brush tool. I'm going to come over here and create a mask. That is my mask icon, this square rectangle with a hole in it. And I'm going to click that on my red layer, and you can see that it creates this, which is called a mask. Now a mask is reliant upon black and white, and in my color palette I have black as my foreground color, white as my background color. I can change those from white to black just by clicking these two arrows, or I can click the X key on the keyboard and it will push those back and forth. If I want pure black and pure white, I can click this icon in here. So if I have colored icons in here, a red as my foreground color, and let me go to my background color and I'll make that color let's make it a yellow or a green. And if I click on these two black and white shapes right here, it will give me true black and true white, and then once again I can go back and forth. Why is this important? Because in a mask, black is going to reveal what is underneath that mask, and white is going to conceal what is underneath this red layer. So let's take a look at that. I'm on black. My opacity of my brush is 100%, meaning I'm going to be revealing 100% of what is underneath this red layer. So if I take my brush and I'm going to click on my mask right here, there's a little white edge around my mask, and I just swipe across my red, it is going to reveal the yellow that is underneath that. I'm going to click on my yellow layer and I'm going to create a mask. And there it is, and I've got the white selection around that, and I'm going to make sure I'm on black, so I click there, I'm going to switch that, there's solid black, and now I'm going to swipe across the yellow, and it's going to reveal the blue that is underneath. So it looks like the same thing that we did with the eraser tool, except that if I go to the white brush right now, 100% white color, and I have clicked on my mask, I can now restore what has been taken away. Now, when I was teaching this in high school, my students had a hard time with black reveals and white conceals, but that's exactly what we're doing here. We're revealing what is underneath the red layer, and the white is concealing what is underneath that white layer. But still, they had a hard time with that concept. The way I taught it to them was black erases and white restores. But we're really not erasing anything. We're just revealing what is underneath our top layer and restoring what is underneath. So let's take a look at this again, and then let's move on to a photograph. I click on my layer, I go to my black brush, make sure I'm on my brush here, I'm at 100%, and I can reveal what is underneath this red. I'm going to go to the yellow, and I'm going to go to the mask, and as I swipe, I can reveal what is underneath that. What is underneath this blue? Nothing. So if we click and create a mask, and we swipe, make sure we're selected on our mask, and we swipe across, we get our checkerboard panel, which means that is a transparent background and there's nothing there. So to restore those colors, back to the white, swipe across that, my blue is restored. Click on the mask here and go to white, and there's my yellow, and now click on my red mask, and there it is. Now, if at any time I click, I'm on my black, I'm on my brush, I'm on 100%, and I run my brush across and it's black, what it means is I am not on my mask, I'm on my layer. So I need to undo that, Control Z, click on my mask, and then there it is. Now if I want to restore that, I go to white, but if I'm clicked on my layer again, what's going to happen? I'm going to paint white, and that's because I'm not on my mask. So that is the basic fundamental of a layer mask, a mask which lets me conceal and reveal what is underneath my layer, and this gives us huge power when we're talking about a photograph. So let's bring in a photograph. Here's a picture of our graduation from this year. And what we're going to do is create a layer mask. I'm looking at the sky. Maybe the sky's a little bit washed out. Maybe this is a little bit dark over here. So I'm going to create an adjustment layer. Adjustment layers can be found in this little circle right here that is half filled with white and half filled with black. And if I click on that, you can see it gives me all these options. We're going to look at several of these. But right now we're going to look at levels, because with levels, I can take this properties box here and I can control the density of my image. So this is my midtone slider right here. This is my black slider right here, and this is my white slider over here. So I can adjust these to wherever I want to go. I'm going to bring this down till I get the sky where I want it, and I think that's a little bit richer. And I can close this out and I can turn this off, and you can see I have made my sky a little bit more dense. But I've ruined this part down here even more because it is now too dark. So I'm going to click on my mask. I'm going to bring the size of my brush down by hitting my bracket key on my keyboard, and I'm going to go to black. I'm on my brush, and I don't want to erase all 100% of my pixels. I only want to do about half. So let's put that at 50%, and now I'm going to swipe across, and we can see that that is lightening up. If I want more control, I can bring my brush down smaller, and I'm going to do another swipe, and it's continuing to lighten up. And I'll go through and do that again, and I'll clean that up just a little bit. And now, as I look at click on my eyeball here to turn my mask off, you can see that only the sky is affected. I could go through here a little bit more, and if you want that faster, you could set your opacity up higher. I'm just going to keep it there and do multiple swipes, and that kind of cleans it up. Okay, so levels, that's one way to change the density of your image. Let's do another one. Let's click another adjustment layer, and this time I'm going to do curves. Curves is basically the same as levels. They work in a little different ways, but they do essentially the same thing. So with my curves, I'm going to bring my density up. And I'll bring this bottom portion up here. And now I've made my picture a little bit brighter. And I'll close out my properties panel. And as we look at my curves, I've brightened up my foreground. But look what I've done to my sky again. So I click on my mask. This time I'm just going to go ahead and put 100% on there. And I'm just going to come through here and paint that out. And bring it back to the way it was underneath. And you can see I hit a little bit of the press box there, so I want to make this smaller. Click on that. I'm going to go to my white and I'm going to restore that. And that's not looking too bad. So as I turn my curves off, you can see that that has brightened up my foreground. And the levels is my sky, and we take both of them down. There's our original picture. So we've made some controls here, and the great advantage is that we have the ability to go back and correct things later on if we want to, if it's not right. If we were to save this file and then open it at a later date, all these layers will remain intact, and we'll be able to continue to edit these as long as they remain individual layers. Let's look at another step. Let's add another adjustment layer. So we're going to click right here, and we're going to go to Hue, Saturation, and we can bump up our saturation if we want to, make our colors a little bit richer. And so I'm going to just make them a little bit stronger here, and close out the properties box, turn that on and off, and the colors are just a little bit richer. I'm going to do another adjustment layer. This time I'm going to hit black and white. And this is another little trick that a lot of people aren't aware of when we're dealing with layer masks. But I'm going to hit black and white, and you can see that it instantly changes our picture to black and white. Now, when we have an adjustment layer, it affects every layer underneath it. If I had 50 more layers here, all of those layers would be affected by this black and white adjustment layer, or any of these other adjustment layers. And there is a way to turn that off. We're going to look at that in just a minute. But as I click that eyeball, we can see that we have changed this to color. So let's just say we want to leave part of this picture in color and part of it in black and white. So let's look at making another adjustment here. I'm going to click on my adjustment layers. I'm going to go to black and white, and that is going to strip all the color out of here, leaving us with a black and white image and a mask right here. I'm going to grab my brush. I'm going to make sure I'm on 100% and I'm on black. And now I'm going to zoom in here a little bit on this flag. And I'm going to take my brush way down, and I can paint that in. And there's my color in my American flag, our New Mexico flag here, bright yellow. Let's go in and paint that with the yellow, with the red Zia in the middle. And now I've got color on a couple of different things. What is nice is that if I was to accidentally run that over there, I would just change this to the white. I could hit the X key and it would go right back. And now I can come in here and delete where I messed up. And I can do that as many times as necessary. And when I look at my picture now, I have the tones that are kind of cool. And this is how they create those images that have just a splash of color. They don't strip the color out, they only strip out what is needed. If I'm to click on that eyeball, you can see my color's still there. And this is important because if I was in business and I gave somebody a picture like this and they thought, that is great, I love this, but they came back later and said, well, our CEO looked at this picture and they want to see it in full color. Then what you do is you go in and say, no problem, there it is. But if you've erased that color and left only the color in these flags and you don't have the original negative, the original file, then you're not getting that color back. So this is a great way to manipulate your images without doing something permanent that you're not going to be able to come back and undo at a later date. So now let's take it up a step. Let's bring in an image here. A couple of tennis players and another picture of a dancer. And we're going to do just a quick, simple composite using adjustment layers and layer masks, and taking something that used to be rather complex and hard to accomplish, and now it's really a very simple feat. So we're going to grab this dancer here, and we're going to pop her into this picture here. Going to resize that, Command T, grab the handles, pull it down, and we're going to size that up about like that. Hit enter to apply those changes. And now we've got two pictures here. What we're going to do with layer 1, which is our dancer, is make a layer mask. We're going to come in here, black. We want to go to our brush tool, and we're going to keep our opacity around 20%. In this case, it's 22%. We're going to come in here with our brush, and we're going to start painting this out. Click. When I click, it does 22%. I leave the click and I click again, and it takes off another 22%. And I just continue doing this until I've got the type of transparency that I want. So that line is gone there, and I'm going to come in a little bit, come in up here, just touch that hand. I want these two pictures blending together. Something like that. Now let's say that I came down here and I kept working this until that hand was gone. Well, that's too much. So I just switch to white and I bring it back, go back to the black, and work it where I want it. I like that. Okay, now the picture of the dancer, she is too pale. She's been washed out. These have good tones in them, but what I'm going to do is create a new adjustment layer. And I'm going to do levels because I want to bring her tones down a little bit. So I'm going to grab the midtones and pull that down, and she looks pretty good right there. So that's good, except what's our problem? A problem is that anything underneath the adjustment layer is going to be affected by it. So this picture of the two tennis girls is underneath the adjustment layer. So what I'm going to do is activate what they call a clipping mask. And a clipping mask is this little item right down here at the bottom of the layers panel, the little arrow going down. And what it's doing, it's an arrow that's pointing down with a line going through it. And that is saying it is if you activate this, if you click on this, it is only going to affect the layer immediately below it. So I'm going to click on that clipping mask. Boom. It only affects the layer immediately below it, nothing else. And so our tennis girls remain unchanged, and this gets done perfectly. If I want to take those levels down just a little bit more now, I can do that, and that brings up some really good color in here. But now her face is too dark. So I'm going to move those properties out of there. Click on that. I'm going to remain on 22%. I'm on black, and I'm on my levels layer, adjustment layer, and I'm going to click on her face. And why is that not going all the way down to the tennis girls? Because it's only the adjustment layer that I'm affecting, not the layer underneath it. If I was to do this layer, then you would see that that would bring what is underneath, and that is the tennis girls. And we don't want that. So let's bring that back. And we're just going to work that little right in there. And that's it. Now we have merged these two layers, and we've got a nice transition going through them. And that is by using our layer mask, our adjustment layer, and our clipping mask. If you wanted to go back to the clipping mask, if I close this out, I can activate that properties by hitting this icon right here. So I'm going to hit that. That brings it up. There's my clipping mask. I can turn it off. I can turn it on. And so I have complete control. And once I save this, when I open it up later on, whether it's a year from now or tomorrow, I'm going to still have these layers intact, and I'll be able to continue to make adjustments. And that is the use of clipping masks. Very powerful tool. I used to illustrate layer masks and adjustment layers to my high school students by telling them, suppose one of you walked into class one day and you were just tired of looking at my face, so you brought a chainsaw with you. You went up to the front of the class and you cut off my face with a chainsaw. So as I was laying there bleeding on the floor, somebody called the police, and the police came and they put the student in cuffs, and as they were marching him out of the class, he turned around and yelled back at me, "I'm sorry, Mr. Holm. That was probably a stupid move on my part, and I wish I hadn't done it, and I'm sorry. But you know what? That was too late for sorries, because my face was gone, it wasn't coming back, and he was going to prison, and there was no changing what was already done." Whereas another student might walk into class and carry a mask or a piece of paper up to the front of the room and say, "I'm tired of looking at your face, Mr. Holm," and take a piece of paper and cover my face with it. And then the student pull the mask off, throw it down and say, "I don't know what I was thinking. I'm sorry. That was pretty rude on my part," and go take their seat. And I would say, hey, no harm done. An adjustment layer and a layer mask, it's not permanent. You can always go back and undo what you've already done. So if you do something stupid, it's no big deal. You just undo it. So try to implement layer masks and adjustment layers into your workflow. You'll find that your work will get better. You'll find that you'll be more efficient. You'll find that you get faster. And as things need to change later on down the road, you can just back up and undo what you've already done. Layer masks and adjustment layers, great tools in Photoshop.